share my screen. Thank you. Yes, so here we are. Okay, so I'm going to talk about doing business in Brazil. Here we go. Well, I'm responsible for Hofstede Insights in Brazil. I've been here for a long time. I'm not going to talk very much about myself. Brazil has around, I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazil for those who does not know. Brazil has around 200 million inhabitants, is the world's 50th largest country in land size, and it has around 8,000 kilometers of beautiful beaches. The official language is Portuguese, and the main religion is Christianity and its variation. Oops. It's not going. It's not going. No. Okay, here we go. Brazil has 27 states plus the country capital, but only 3 states generates more than 50% of our gross national products, being Minas Gerais with 9%, Rio de Janeiro with 11%, and São Paulo with 32%. So if you want to do business in Brazil, you may want to focus on these 3 states for doing business. Brazil, the 3 main influences of Brazil culture are the Portuguese, the Afro-descendants, Indians in Brazil, but you will also find a large communities of people from Italy, France, Germany, Lebanon, Japan, Korea, and so many others. So Brazil, you may consider Brazil as a multicultural country, where you find many communities cultural in Brazil. So Brazil has not a single culture. It's multicultural. So what I'm going to tell about the culture of Brazil is it's hard to say. Brazil is not a single culture. What you call it's hard to describe the average Brazilian because of that. But I am going to tell a little bit of Brazilian. So excuse myself if you know some Brazilians different what I'm going to tell, because for sure you may know different Brazilians of those of my screen. Okay. Main traits of Brazilian cultures are: we are hierarchical, but we are very informal. You will see Brazilians call others by first name. That's what we say. We hardly call the others using the word Mr. or Mrs. Usually we use the first name. We are collectivist and relational. We like to belong to groups, as I'm going to tell later. We like to relate to others. We are flexible in relation to laws and rules. We are not normative. We are spiritual and religious. We have multiple faiths, even though most of Brazilians belong to a Christianity religions. You will see Brazilians also experimenting other faiths, especially Afro-descendants faith. We are indulgent and cheerful. We like the pleasures of life. We search for that. We like carnival, beer, barbecues, things like that. Okay, let's talk about the Hofstede research. Brazil, the first dimension is power distance. Brazil has a high score on power distance dimension. This means that the hierarchy is accepted and expected, even viewed as good. This means rank and status affect business interactions. Subordinates will defer to their boss until the boss is supposed to look after their needs. That's a typical Brazilian company. But if you are going to relate to a Brazilian subsidiary of a global company, it may operate more likely the global company or its headquarters. So you may find difference between working with a typical Brazilian companies or a global company in Brazil. So you can relate to almost anyone in Brazil, but you sure must find out who take finally the decisions. So don't misunderstand just because you relate to anyone. That person is the one who excuse me. Okay. So don't misunderstand just because you relate to anyone. You really must find who takes the decisions in Brazil. Okay. Oops. Second dimension is individualism versus collectivism. Brazil has a lower score for individualism. This means Brazil is a more collectivist culture. This means that life is structured around multiple in-groups. Typically, this is extended family, close friends, colleagues, business relationship is something very normal in Brazilian life. The responsibility of an individual is to their group, and they are obliged to show loyalty and sacrifice sometimes for their well-being of their group, knowing that in return the group will show the same loyalty to them. Something that you'll find in Brazil is that Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, LinkedIn are largely used. Brazil is one of the countries that most use this kind of tools. Kisses and hugs are very frequently among whole work colleagues and friends. So we like, we like that. This is like to be with friends, to celebrate, even during the weekdays, not only weekends. So that's typical Brazilians. But when you are invited to a meeting or a dinner, be aware that Brazilians are rather flexible than punctual, clockwise. A delay of 15 minutes they expect, sometimes even more. And know that a confirmed meeting is not really confirmed until you reconfirm it. If you have a meeting for, let's say, within a month, please reconfirm it 1 or 2 times before you go, because Brazil may change it sometimes without notice. Greetings in first meetings and exchange cards are common. As a foreigner, you will be treated with Brazilian hospitality regardless of your position. Addressing the attendants, you may use first name in general, but you may need to use Mr. or Mrs. and the last name for doctors and lawyers. Only that in general. You may use first name for 99% of the people you meet in Brazil. How to dress for business meeting. Just for the first meeting, formality is safe, but Brazil is a hot country, and most of the company has abolished ties and suits, so you probably will not need ties for seconds meetings. Later meetings, check how the counterparts will be dressed. Yeah, it depends. It may be formal or not. Usually Brazilians are not formal. Depends on the dinner. We Brazilians, we always start a meeting with a small talk to create a positive atmosphere. We like to talk about food and drink. We like to talk about our national drink, which is caipirinha. We may talk about sports, football, family, weather, just before jumping the subject of the meeting. So that's nice. Third dimension is masculinity versus femininity. Brazil is core median on that. So our society values symbols of success as much as take care of people. In general, competition is not seen as a regular aspect of life, and conflict should be avoided within in-groups. Group recognition is highly appreciated. We are not a conflict appreciated kind of country, not even competition. We are mid-size competition kind of country compared to other countries. Uncertainty avoidance. Brazil scored very high on uncertainty avoidance, indicating that the country is very uncomfortable with ambiguity. So be prepared for heavy bureaucracy, but also for suggestions on how to avoid it or cut corners. Labor laws are very complex in Brazil due to that. We have a very heavy bureaucracy in Brazil. So if you want to do business in Brazil, probably you will need lawyers to help you on that. Don't try to do it by your own. Use local lawyers for that. Brazil is a religious country. The Christian Catholic Church represents the majority of the Brazilian people, but also can be found Protestants, Jews, Muslims, and rituals of Afro origin. And you will not find religious conflict in general in Brazil. So it's a peaceful country. But again, Brazilians are flexible in relation to laws and rules. Due to our bureaucracy, you will also find people that will help you on cut corners on that. So be aware of that. Sometimes there's something simple that represent no trouble, but sometimes that cutting corners may represent trouble. So be aware of that. And also because of that, the corruption perception index of Brazil is high. We are not the highest, we don't have the highest corruption index in the world. Actually, we are mid-size on that, but we are not as the same as Northern Europe, for instance, on that matter, or Northern America, for instance. So we are not the worst country on that, but for sure we are not the best. So we have a high index of corruption in Brazil. So doing business, you must take care of that when you do that, especially working with government in Brazil. Indulgence. Brazil has a high score for indulgence, meaning we like to indulge it for life. We like to have a good life. We search for that. A typical good weekend would be a barbecue and beer with friends. Brazilians also like to tell jokes and laugh. So Brazilians like to indulge themselves. So that would be a typical weekend with friends. We like carnival, football, and beaches. We have 8,000 kilometers of beaches. So we like to, the life. Questions? I guess we're going to have a moment at the end of this workshop at the end for questions.
Yes.
Okay. So that's it. So that's it, Carrie. You may change that.
I will now then give the presenter rights to Andre.
Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning to those who are in Brazil. I hope you can see my video, listen to my voice, and see my screen as well. Kari, please do let me know if there is any issue on either of these topics. Welcome to this webinar. I'd like to thank Hofstede Insights for the opportunity of doing this initiative together with Enrich in Brazil. My name is André Barbosa. I'm a senior consultant at SPI, a private consultancy company located in Portugal. We have offices abroad in Spain, China, and USA, and constant flow of projects with Brazil, especially regarding international cooperation on science, technology, and innovation. One example of these projects that we do in Brazil is Enrich in Brazil, which I'm going to present a little bit in details from now on, and then to provide you some insights on the current STI landscape in Brazil in terms of instruments, actors, and possible future trends concerning the ongoing presidential elections. So, starting by briefly presenting the Enrich in Brazil initiative. So, Enrich in Brazil is an initiative funded by the European Commission under the program Horizon 2020. It started as a project in reply to a topic of Horizon 2020. This topic envisaged the creation of centers or a network of centers of European research and innovation in 3 countries: Brazil, China, and USA. SPI, our company, was involved in the successful proposals for the 3 centers. We are currently coordinating the center for China, and we are deputy coordinators of the center for Brazil. The project that we put forward to apply for this call was called SEBRABIT, which indeed intends to support the establishment of a European Innovation Center in Brazil, which is called indeed Enrich in Brazil. The implementation of the Enrich in Brazil is divided into different stages, which follows a business model approach. We already finalized the planning phase of the center. We are now in the piloting phase of the center, in which we are providing services on an experimental basis. By the beginning of next year, we intend to move towards a full implementation phase, which means providing the full range of our services and moving towards a financial self-sustainability of the center. The project SebraBIC, which supports the creation of Enrich in Brazil, comprises a consortium of 12 organizations, 8 from Europe, 4 from Brazil. The coordinator of the initiative is one of the Fraunhofer Institutes, IPK, located in Berlin, and we have partners spread across Europe as well as in Brazil. In Brazil, we have some key players from the Brazilian innovation system, such as the National Industry Confederation, CNI, or AMPEI, which is the National Association for Innovative Companies. So going a little bit further on the goals of Enrich in Brazil, our main goal is to secure the conditions for any European entity wishing to internationalize its activities to the Brazilian market. Either it's a startup, an entrepreneur, an SME, a research center, a technology park, and so forth. So we encourage and facilitate the cooperation in research, technology, and entrepreneurship between Europeans and Brazilians, so across the actors that work throughout the entire innovation value chain. We want to be, by 2021, indeed the main hub and contact point for this internationalization process and for this bilateral cooperation. And we want to achieve that by promoting excellence in business research and innovation cooperation, by having a self-sustainable center in terms of financial aspects, promoting win-win situations and cooperation of mutual interest, and connecting European and Brazilian actors, either from the research sector, from the innovation sector, or from the business sector. And this leads me to the 3 main categories of our potential, of our stakeholders, and thus of our potential clients. As I said, we work across the entire value chain. So we work with research actors, with innovation actors, and with business actors. So we intend to provide services for people doing basic research up to people which are willing to find customers, suppliers, or partners for their products and services in Brazil.
Right, we're not seeing the slides right now.
Sorry?
We're not seeing the slides. Are you sharing your screen now?
Yes, I have been sharing my screen. You did not see anything?
No.
No, just 1 second then. Let me just confirm. I apologize for that. What about now?
Now we see it, yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. I do apologize for that. I'll just go a little bit back on the slides I just went. I'm not repeating myself, but just for you to have a visual idea of what I was presenting. So about the 3 pilot centers in Brazil, China, and USA, the partnership that supports the creation of the center Enrich in Brazil in the Brazilian market, so how it's geographically spread, our mission, vision, and objectives, and the 3 categories of stakeholders and potential clients for the services provided by Enrich in Brazil. I was now going to refer to our service portfolio. As I said, we work across the entire innovation value chain, which means that our services address different needs and priorities of our clients in the different stages of this innovation value chain. So we have these six steps, which we call the customer journey, which indeed reflect these different needs and priorities of our clients, their process of internationalization to Brazil. So to get informed, to receive relevant information about how the Brazilian market works, to get connected, so to find reliable contacts in the country to further develop partnerships and collaborations, to get funded, so to raise financial resources in the country to fund operations and activities in there, to get going, so to receive skills, knowledge, and other type of competences which are needed to address the market, to get visible, so already within the market, to receive orientation, consultancy, to get your brand or to get your activities known by the Brazilian entities, and finally to get advice, so customized and top shelf legal advice, then thinking about having a more consistent and steering presence in the country by opening up a company, by opening up an office and other sources and alternatives of having a physical presence in the country. So this is another way of presenting our service portfolio. We have already provided a few sets of services in this year. As I said, we are in the piloting stage, so we are providing services on an experimental basis. This includes some training, some webinars, some reports that we have already developed, and the participation in some events such as boot camps, info sessions, and other type of workshops. Some upcoming activities that we have on planned in the short term. Next week on Monday, we have another webinar regarding applied research sectors in Brazil about the electronics and digital technologies, so providing a general description of how this sector works in Brazil in terms of applied research. At the end of the month, we have an innovation boot camp taking place in Malaga, in Spain, in which you can present your innovative business idea, to get contacts with potential investors and partners. And finally, at the beginning of November, an innovation tour to Brazil, in which European entities are invited to get to know different key players from the Brazilian innovation system, such as the National Development Bank, Petrobras, research centers in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Belo Horizonte. We also, Enrich Brazil, one of its underlying values is to work as a network-based organization. This means that we do not intend to have a heavy human resource structure or a heavy physical structure. We want to rely on a broader community to provide services, to receive services, to disseminate and to spread the word about Enrich in Brazil. So there are different ways in which stakeholders can get involved in the initiative, and I'd like to emphasize that message because those participating in this webinar may be interested in involving themselves as individuals or involving their organizations within Enrich in Brazil community. You can be either a service provider, which means that whenever we receive a demand from a client, we may outsource the provision of that service to another organization which have more concrete and specific knowledge and expertise to provide it with high quality standards. You may be interested in becoming a soft landing hub, which means that you are an organization placed in Brazil which provides physical space for European entities that would like to have short-term or long-term stays in Brazil. So as an incubator, a technology park, and so forth, you may apply to become a soft landing hub. We have our supporters and ambassadors, so people willing to become representatives of Enrich and to spread the word about the center. And finally, individuals and organizations as beneficiaries, so receiving advantages of being a member of Enrich in Brazil community, and also, of course, receiving services from the center. I'm not going through details of each of these categories, just get this general idea that you may be involved in different ways in our Enriching community. As a final note about Enriching Brazil, do not forget to follow us through our website, through our LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Get in contact with us in case you have any doubts by our email, and do not forget, until the end of 2018 we are providing services free of charge. So do enjoy this opportunity of receiving our expertise and knowledge free of charge till the end of 2018. That was about Enrich in Brazil. I will now shift my focus towards the STI landscape in Brazil. Of course, we have not many time to go into details of the different aspects. The idea is really to provide a general overview on this, and of course, we are available to further develop it in future occasions. Some general figures about the country has already been given by Almiro, so I'm not going to focus too much on them, but just to highlight that we are among the top 10 larger economies in the world. We are also among the top 5 most populated countries in the world, and of course, within the scenario of Latin America, Brazil is indeed the dominating economy, the dominating country. Some general figures about the country in terms of population, area, and GDP. Of course, due to our continental dimension, we have lots of students at universities. Still, in relative terms, it's a relatively low rate in comparison, for example, to European countries. And in terms of actors, and starting by the political actors, and at the federal level, and that's an important note to be given. Brazil is a federation, so we have 3 different political levels: the federal one, the state one, and the municipal one. All of them having relatively legal and institutional and financial autonomy among themselves. Starting with the federal level, we have different ministries with competences with regards to science, technology, and innovation policies. Of course, the most important one is MCTIC, the Ministry of Science, Technology, Innovation and Communication. The Ministry of Development, Industry and Foreign Trade also has an innovation secretary, so it also has some competences with regards to innovation policies. The Ministry of Education, for example, encompasses CAPES, which is an agency dealing with the qualification of high-level institutions, professors, and with the qualification and evaluation of universities and research centers, so also having an indirect link to that. The other ministries referred in here, such as health, mining and energy, the Ministry of Agriculture or of Environment, have some competences with regards to STI when this topic is interrelated to the topics which they cover on their own ministry. Other executing agencies, so to say, at the federal level, involve CNPq, which is the National Council for Scientific and Technological Development. So it is the Brazilian funding agency for research. Along with CNPq, we have FINEP, which is the Brazilian Innovation Agency. So CNPq together with FINEP are the two most important funding agencies at the federal level in Brazil. CNPq dealing with research funding, FINEP dealing with innovation funding. CNPq works essentially with scholarships and grants. FINEP works essentially with loans and credit lines. Other important actors at the federal level comprise Embrapa, which is the Brazilian company for industrial research and innovation. It follows the model of the Fraunhofer Institutes. I'll go into details in a few slides on that. Apex is the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency, and CNI, as the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry, so represented the industrial sector of Brazil. Within CNI, or CNI comprises three subgroups within its internal structure. One of these subgroups is SENAI, which is related to industrial apprenticeship, and SENAI is important because SENAI runs innovation institutes in every state of Brazil. I can go into details later on if we have time on that. Going to the state level, the most important actors comprise what we call the FAPs, which are the state level funding agencies for research and innovation. Okay, and of course those funding agencies from the most developed and richer states in Brazil, such as São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Minas Gerais, have a reasonable amount of resources to spend on research and innovation. We have also regional development banks, such as Banco do Nordeste, Banco da Amazônia, BRDE, and so forth, which may also provide loans and credit lines for productive investments linked to innovative ideas. And as I said, as a federation and bearing legal autonomy, the states can also have their own innovation laws. At the city level, there are no specific STI-related entities, but the local governments may establish some tax incentives to the setup of startups or of technology-based companies. That is the case, for example, of the city of Campinas, which reduced what is the equivalent to the VAT tax in Europe, reduced that to attract specifically for startups. This is just to, in terms of funding institutions, I already gave the overview about FINEP, CNPq, the regional development banks. Just to highlight in this case, the National Development Bank, BNDES, which have specific lines to fund innovation, and Embrapa as well within its model also works with its own resources to fund innovation. Going to the private sector, we have some private equity entities and some business angels organizations in Brazil which are investing in startups and technology-based companies. ABVCAP is the most well-known venture capital organization in Brazil, so comprising the most important investment funds and venture capital organizations in the country. And going from the actors to two of the most important legal bases of science, technology, and innovation in Brazil, starting with the innovation law. It's relatively recent. It's from 2004. It was amended in 2010, and in 2016 it was again substantially modified by what we call the new STI legal framework. Essentially, the innovation law established the basis of the Brazilian, to structure the Brazilian science, technology, and innovation system. It also ruled the implementation of science, technology, and innovation projects jointly by public and private institutions, provided some guidance on the funding priorities with regards to science, technology, and innovation, and so forth. In the most recent modification of that law, some progress were achieved in terms of reducing the level of bureaucracy and complexity for public institutions to work together with foreign enterprises in terms of jointly developing products and services. It also reduced this bureaucracy and complexity for joint activities between public and private companies, and also on the joint exploitation of technology between R&I public institutions and private enterprises. Still, there's a long way to go in Brazil in terms of freeing public institutions to work together with private organizations. Another legal basis for science, technology, and innovation in Brazil is what we call the Good Law. It was enacted in 2005 and is a follow-up of the Innovation Law, as it was already foreseen in Article 28 of the Innovation Law, and essentially deals with tax incentives for R&D activities in Brazil. Essentially, it provides a deduction from 20 to 34% of the income tax and of a specific social contribution that there is in Brazil over the amount spent on R&D. It also foresees the deduction of up to 50% of the IPI tax that we have in Brazil in the case of of this tax applied to the acquisition of machinery and equipment for R&D. The way that this law has been enacted, it is mostly oriented towards medium and large size companies, because these are the type of companies that usually opt for the real profit regime in Brazil with regard to income tax. And also, one of the essential discussions about this law is how you define research and development activities. This definition has been taken from the Frascati manual. So it essentially refers to technology innovation comprising activities on basic research or applied research or technology development and prototyping. Okay, so these are the essential definitions that falls within the applicability of this good law. So in terms of other type of actors, and I'm going towards the end of my presentation, we have several public research institutes spread across Brazil. Most of them are quite recent. In this context, I would like to highlight the National Institutes for Science and Technology, the INCTs, okay, which reply to public calls from the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, which are thematic focused. We also have private research institutes, and the best example of those are the Senai Institutes, as I said, 25 innovation institutes and 57 technology institutes under the umbrella of Senai, spread across the country, working on pre-competitive phase of research. Also, science parks. We have 96 science parks in Brazil. Most of them still under or initiating their own operations. Most of them are located in the southeast region. To finalize, I'd like to highlight the case of Embrapi, which acts both as a public research and innovation actor as well as a funding entity. As I said, Embrapi works inspired by the way that Fraunhofer Institutes work, which means that they provide 1/3 of the funding to a certain industrial project. Another third of the funding is provided by the what we call the Embrapi unit, so a research center or a technology center, and the final third of the funding of the project is provided by a private company. So we have the academia, we have private organizations and public bodies working together. Embrapi is quite recent. They started their operations around 2013-14, but so far they have implemented more than 130 projects with an investment amount of more than 240 million reais. Embrapi is currently on an ongoing basis recruiting or certifying what they call Embrapi units, which are nothing more than research centers which are receive the credential of Embrapi to work under the umbrella of Embrapi, and thus which are entitled to receive Embrapi funds to develop industrial projects together with private companies. Really, as a final note, some perspectives on STI policies, take into account what the candidates running for the second round of Brazilian presidential elections have provided in their governmental programs. So Fernando Haddad from the leftist party says about structuring the innovation ecosystems in key strategic areas such as advanced manufacturing, biotechnology, nanotechnology, pharmacy, energy and defense, expanding the national STI funding system, using resources from the social fund of the pre-salt oil exportation, recreating the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, so taking out the telecommunication area of the ministry, and developing a 10-year plan to expand investment in science, technology and innovation in order to reach 2% of investment, 2% of the GDP invested in RDI by 2030. The other candidate from the rightist party says about the creation of technology hubs, following the example of USA, Taiwan, Israel, South Korea and Japan, creating research centers on graphene and niobium in order to Brazil to reach leadership on research related to those mineria, and to stimulate technology-based, to stimulate entrepreneurship learning processes in the universities to foster technology-based entrepreneurial processes and startups related to that. I thank you very much for your attention. I am sorry if I took longer than expected with the presentation, and I'm available to reply to any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for both of our speakers. now we have time for questions, and I will stop the recording now. So, in case you have a question that you don't want to be recorded, it's fine to ask it as well. You can either ask them from everyone in the chat window, or you can address them either to me, Hofstede Insights, or to Almiro or Andre directly.